How to gain clarity on what to do next. Data gathering is a concept I like to call vantage points. The problem we're trying to solve. As you try to take a step forward, what happens often is your mind just starts to feel foggy. You become unsure if you have enough information to take the step. You question the process and convince yourself perhaps you need more information. You freeze and revert to consuming more information. And it becomes a cycle every time you attempt to move. Do you find this to be an issue? Well, we're going to solve it here. The common mistakes I see. Convincing yourself you need to do more research due to the fogginess that you feel when you try and take a step forward. You respond to the feeling of uncertainty by trying to read more and do more research. Trying to think your way out of a situation when you've already tried. The objectives here. An understanding of what's happening in your mind and what causes the fogginess. Provide a mental model to help you fight your way through the fog. Okay, I want you to imagine you're climbing a mountain. The path is often unclear when you're at the base. And we always want more certainty. And the reason that is due to how our brain is on this survival track and wants to stay safe. When you have certainty, when you know where to put your feet, it feels safe. When you don't, there's always a risk that you might not survive, and it could be dangerous. So that's what happens when you're in this exploration mode. So we get stuck because we don't think we have enough certainty. We want to be sure there is no risk before we move. So we're constantly researching, but it yields diminishing returns. By the time people reach out to me, they've done lots and lots and lots of kind of cycles of this, looking for more information and realizing that, you know what, I've not actually got anywhere. I've got a whole pile of books and I've not actually made any progress. There's nothing new. You might be very knowledgeable about the topic and the theory, but you've not actually learnt anything about the journey you need to take. There is no more data to gather to help us to make the next step. We've reached a point I like to call information saturation. What is it? Any new piece of information doesn't make our decision any clearer. Are you experiencing that right now? It would be like moving sideways around the mountain when you're trying to gain altitude. You end up using your resource, time and energy and money buying courses, reading books, listening to podcasts, going to events, all about going around the mountain at the same altitude. More options, they just make your mind bloated. You start reading theories about how to do things, and now you've got 5 different theories that you could follow, and it makes it more. You are struggling with one, now you've got 5 to choose from. So I want to introduce this concept I call a vantage point. It's a place where we can see what we could not see before. So where you get up to a point in a mountain and you can start looking around. Going back to Ollie the Octopus, when we run experiments to discover and learn, it allows us to observe new information and make realizations, which informs the next step. So from a vantage point, the path becomes clearer. So when you're at the base of the mountain looking up, you can't see very clearly because the clouds are covering it. But when you work your way up to the first vantage point, you can see the next steps become a little bit clearer. Now, you've probably had these situations in your life up to now, where I like to think of it as moments of insight. When you're like, wow, I didn't realize you could do that. The feeling of gaining insight is incredibly powerful. So when you try something, you're like, I think I could get into this. Or say you perhaps you try photography and you realize, there's some new things I can learn here. And realization, a deep understanding of the situation you're in. This can only be done upon your application. So I'll use a quick example with content creation. I remember when I first made the videos, I was thinking about all the technical side of the videos. Then only when starting did I realize, you actually have to make some content that sounds interesting with the hook and all of this. And I realized, that's interesting. I quite like this script writing side of things. Vantage points unlock the opportunity to gain insight. Now, I want you to remember at this point, there's no right or wrong, only more data. And this data will unlock the power of insight. It gives you an opportunity for insight. And this allows you to make better decisions. Again, going back to the mountain, you're climbing up. As you travel, you just constantly check against your mission. Am I gaining altitude here or not? And this new data will unlock the ability to course correct as needed. And I think this is one of the big differences between the traditional path, where there's a very defined ladder, versus an exploratory path where you can meander through the jungle or up the mountain in different routes. It's hard to know because there are often no pathways going forwards, or no known pathways, and you have to find it. So the process here is we move, we get to a vantage point, and we see what new information we have. So you keep climbing and gathering more data, and it will result in more clarity. The path becomes clearer. I like to have this visual of you're trying to climb a mountain, and you get there and you're thinking about these three options. You're not really sure which one, but you get there and you realize there are just enormous boulders in the way that you can't climb over. So your decision has been made already. You can't go down that route. And sometimes you see a new route form in front of you that was a lot easier, that you couldn't see at the base. This really happens when you're making big pivots in your life. When you start speaking to people in industry, if you're looking to change, you're looking to start a new company or change industry, you don't really know until you get involved. So we know we need to get to a vantage point now. What does moving to a vantage point look like? It's taking what you know already and attempting to implement it into the real world in some way. So it might be thinking about the conversations you might want to have with people, but now actually going out and having those conversations. It's executed in the real world. There should be some interaction with the real world, and really, and often with other people, not in your head. It is creation and production versus consumption. So if you're thinking about making content, making videos, writing, it would be the equivalent of creating and publishing it versus just watching about how to create it. So here's some examples. Conversations with people in domains, writing a draft article, story or piece, shooting the video and editing, drawing the picture, painting the canvas, starting the website and writing the copy, taking the photo, experimenting with shots. How do I know when I've reached a vantage point? You'll get to a vantage point when you've produced or created something that can be reviewed in some way. I mean, that's like a loose rule of thumb you can follow. Obviously, there are plenty of exceptions here, but it's a fairly good one. So if you're applying for jobs, rather than thinking about how the best way to write a CV, it will be to actually send out the CV and seeing responses come back, but really, actually producing and doing in some way. You often feel different to how you felt before. Once you've sent things out, once you've produced, once you've published, once you've created, you'll usually have a different feeling around it after you've created something. You'll also notice new things about what you're working on. And going quite a few modules back, this allows your brain, the prediction engine, to have more new data to process. And this is a really good thing. This is a sign of progress. How long should I keep going? Now, this varies. I tend to say good guidance is at least 3 to 5 iterations or repetitions of whatever you're doing. 10 is a good target, 20 even better. So this might be, let's say you're trying to post on Twitter or post on one of the various social media platforms. Don't review it and judge how you feel about it after the first one. You want to do kind of 3 or 5, i.e. 10 being a good one, 20 being even better. I did this for my social media content. I think I went for 10 videos before I really wanted to see how it felt, because that would be a vantage point for me. I did the same thing with intermittent fasting as well. It wasn't just my first 2 days doing it. I wanted to see what happened after 30 days. The principle here is you need enough data to make a reasonable assessment. Now, it's quite tricky. I notice we have to be fairly fluid with this, especially when I'm coaching people live, and it varies from person to person. So you'll have to make a judgment call here, but it's hard. It's never 1. It's usually kind of 5 or 10 at least. Example, write 5 articles, 5 videos, 5 interviews, social media posts, or attend 5 classes. If you're trying a new hobby, you don't want to just attend 1 class really, you want to attend a handful if you can. When to seek a vantage point. So you might think, okay, am I at a vantage point or not? This is a good way to check whether you need to move. You're clearly not making any progress in what you're trying to do. You feel like you're going around in circles. You see repeated patterns of behavior. You decide what you're going to do, then you change, and then you loop around, and you do it again. You decide something different. You change, and so on. The next one, potentially is a bit of a triggering pain point for a lot of people, because I see this with clients. They increasingly seek validation and opinions from others, which naturally are usually very different. And so they say, oh, I can't decide. So-and-so said this. I should do this. So-and-so said this. If you're doing that, it's usually means that, you know, at an unconscious level, you're desperately searching for more information to gain certainty, but you're not doing it yourself. You're now trying to outsource it to others. You probably need to make a move in some way. Writing pros and cons lists, and it's not making you feel any more confident. Now, I'm an advocate for pro and cons lists, but often I come across people who have already written them, and then a few months later, they're rewriting it again and again, but they've not actually gathered any more data to make that any more effective. Creation to content ratio. This is a simple but vital metric. You want it to never be at 0. 50-50 is not necessary. These are some approximate guidance. Even 1% is a good start. Start really small. I was in a phase, I was at 0 to 100 here, where I would watch YouTube videos, TikTok videos, everything like this about how to create content. When I looked at how much content I created, I hadn't even pressed the record button on the camera. So I was at 0. Then I finally broke it and started to click record on the camera. I was finally creating in some way. And my consumption was still incredibly high at that time, but I was inching my way up 1% at a time, to the point where now there is a lot of creation and my consumption is still fairly high, but definitely nowhere near as high as it was. It's the ratio that's important. If you're addicted to consumption, even 1% will be hard. That's okay. So, I came across clients who are spending kind of 5 to 10 hours a day consuming content, and some of it passes as professional development or like research in some way, or you're reading non-fiction books thinking that you're leveling up in some way. But often you're actually just going around in circles. You're walking around the mountain. Long term, you want to, in an ideal world, try and be above 50%. So if you think about Mr. Beast or any of these big YouTubers, it depends who you are, but you'll probably have your favorites. How much do you think they are consuming versus creating? They're probably spending a lot of their time creating. Yeah. And why do they keep excelling? Because they're gathering lots of data and they are having lots of these insights and realizations to make it better and better. Meanwhile, you might be on the other side of that, just consuming all of their content and not doing anything. Many people are at 0. So summary here. The path will always appear unclear from the base of the mountain. If you've ever walked through fog, it's the same feeling, right? You look in front of you and you can't see. But if you look at your feet, you can see just in front of you, either a few feet or a meter in front of you. But the only thing that could be quite anxiety inducing if you think, I don't know what's around me. But what do we do in real life? If you walk forward, you see a few feet more and a few feet more. The same thing happens if you're driving in a car at night. Your headlights can only show a certain distance and a certain few things in front of you. So what do? You drive forward. The car is doing the action for you. It's moving forward, and then you get to see more things in front of you. It's the same thing here. Moving will enable you to see, and seeing will give you insight. When you are stuck, think, get to a new vantage point. If at any point you start to feel stagnant and for some reason something's not happening for you, you can usually do this as a quick rule of thumb and say, I need to get to a new vantage point. I need to take action first. I need to start taking some steps in any way. The reason I bring this up, obviously we've covered the concept of taking action, but sometimes we can get into this mental trap of being convinced that we are taking action when we're not. So this is how you can do a quick sanity check. I've seen this live with a few clients where we've been working for a few weeks and then we look at their progress, and sometimes they report that they're making progress, but we look at what they're doing and it's more consumption again. They've reverted back to some more consumption. And we'll do this check and we'll say, okay, why do you feel you're not making any ground here? Well, it's because you're not creating in some way. You're not building. Keep an eye out for symptoms of stagnancy. You will need to move to vantage points very often if you're looking to make progress. So here's what to do. Identify what area you need more insight in. Do I actually like writing? That might be what you're looking for to figure out. Generate ways to move in this direction. Use Ollie the Octopus. Writing a paragraph, perhaps trying a poem, writing an article. 3. Pick one that is least overwhelming and has the least friction for you in your mind. Now, they will all have friction. Commit to a period of suspension of belief that you can practice this. Okay, so now, some questions to ask yourself. Are you going around in circles with research, not learning anything new? Do you need to make a move to a new vantage point? Which areas are you blind to most? What steps can you take to get to a vantage point? What areas are still foggy in your head for you? And if you're struggling, what is one small thing that you can do for more clarity? So if you are standing in fog and you are getting disoriented and you're not sure where to go, one thing you can do is take 5 steps forward. You'll have more insight about your situation. You need to do this with your projects here. Okay, key points. We reach information saturation very regularly. We gravitate to acquiring more knowledge to decrease uncertainty and risk. So this is a natural human tendency. This is why I've included this section, because we will keep falling for this trap again and again. There's a point where we must move forward with whatever we have. When we reach a vantage point, we see new things. So always try and move to a new vantage point. Path becomes clearer after realization and insight. So once you've taken some action and walked around, you can nearly rely on the fact that you will have some realizations and insights at that point. New data is always relevant. It allows you to make better decisions. Reframe your journey. Seek vantage points. Now I've got some worksheets here for you to help you figure out whether you need to move to a vantage point, and lots of examples. So just go through the worksheet as usual and check the cheat sheets if you need it. Client stats and observations. Nearly every client has felt the uncertainty and fog. They all get very, very kind of nervous at the edge and they want to stop. It always stops them from moving due to the anxiety and feeling of risk. There's often a sense of, I can't believe I'll feel more clarity if I move. Then they always do. And it does require, sometimes I need to kind of pull them along to help them see that. Realizations usually occur in a 2 to 4 week period after moving to a new vantage point. So when you start taking action, after you've written those kind of 5 or so pieces of content in any way, or 5 applications, you start to have some realizations. Personal stats. Surrendering to the feeling of uncertainty was key, but it was really, really hard. Really hard. So I appreciate how hard this is. The fact that you have to move even though you're feeling uncertain. There is a sense of blind trust you will have to instill on yourself. You'll never feel 100% comfortable, but that is the point. It's like if you're in the fog, you'll never know exactly what is in front of you 10 feet from you. You have to walk first with that blind faith that you will see more. It will make sense when you climb. Try low-stake experiments. You'll experience clarity as you progress. So again, if you're standing in fog, you might put all of your weight back on your right foot and then gently stretch your left foot in front of you and see whether there's ground in front of you and it's safe to walk. That would be the equivalent. I now start to get increasingly more excited about the climb. Now, I think this is a more advanced kind of feeling that you'll have, because once you've taken many iterations, you start to trust that process, and you realize, oh, what can I find beyond what I can see? So for small planes, you might want to, so using the plane analogy here, you might want to give it a week to find new vantage points. Big planes, sometimes over 2 months. That's okay. In that meantime, especially if you're working on big planes, right? So let's say you're looking at potentially starting a new side business, just a new business or a big project that you're doing. Try and make some little mini wins along the way. That will help keep you going in that uncertainty. Okay, where we are. We're now here. Selected specific experiments to gain insight into one particular area. Funny, language, vantage points, the word insight, the word realization, creation over consumption. You want to have that as a bit of a mantra. Mental fog. It is normal to experience mental fog when you get to the edge. Your brain is trying to protect you. Information saturation. When you've got all of this mental fog, you keep going for more information and then you become saturated in it and it starts to bloat your head. So here we're saying, what does it feel like to stand on a rope? No number of YouTube videos will really help you understand that until you actually step onto it. And that's what making your way to a vantage point feels like. Up next, how to make a resilient plan. So one that you can stick to even when life throws curveballs at you. This is a very important one for long-term success. See you in the next one.